Is this a panel on voting rights? Okay. All right. Hey, what we're going to try to teach you right now is how to kick ass.
Oh, yes, this thing is working. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Dorsey, for handing this off to us. So good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? All right. I think we can do a little bit better than that. Is everybody still focused? Y'all still in the building? Okay, that's a little bit better. That's a little bit better. So let me know if I'm a little too loud, too. Oh, closer. I need to go closer. Okay, close. Okay, so thank you again to Dorsey, Norris, Desmond, and Latifah for definitely setting the stage for us and really just grounding us in victory. I really love the message and the setup for this panel. I really like how they talked about victories and wins and just kind of the state of being in the room with some powerhouses. So I really feel like that was appropriate to set this next panel up for us. And as you heard, we're going to be talking about voting rights. So a little bit about me real quick. I'm KD. I'm a member of All of Us or None. I am based here out of the Oakland chapter. I've been a member since 2014, since I graduated the Delancey Street Foundation. I've been a member since 2014, since I graduated from the Delancey Street Foundation. As soon as I got home, I joined the emailing list, and that's how I have been able to stay connected, involved, informed, along in tandem with the Young Women Freedom Center that you guys heard Latifah spoke about earlier. They also have a space in my heart. I finally was able to get the policy fellowship. Shout out to the fellows in the room in 2019. Yes, that's right, give it up. And the rest has really been a blur for me in a good way. And so with that, yes, I'm gonna give a little short speech, we're gonna let our guys introduce themselves, and we're gonna go ahead and continue to hear about the victories as it relates to the work that we do in voting rights in particular. So again, as you just heard, there is definitely significant momentum towards restoring voting rights for formerly incarcerated people. Over the past 2 decades, as you guys just heard, and you will continue to hear, more than 24 states have moved to ease voting rights for people in the community with past convictions. That includes me, you, and everybody in this room. In just the past years alone, sorry about the microphone. Is it me? Okay. I think I gotta stay like this. So in just the past 3 years alone, 7 states have limited disenfranchisement to actual incarceration, bringing the total in that category to 21 states, while one jurisdiction, which is D.C., abolished felony disenfranchisement entirely. And that's a huge thing because there's only 2 other states, Maine and Vermont, that does that. Absolutely, that's very important. And on another note, in 2021, President Biden issued an executive order directing the Attorney General to provide voter education materials to those in federal custody or under federal supervision, as well as those formerly incarcerated brothers and sisters coming home from federal incarceration as well. So as you guys heard, believe it or not, we are out here winning. We are winning, and I'm very excited about the gains and successes. Is this one work? Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that, y'all. So I was saying that I'm very excited about the gains and the successes that I have been a part of and still able to be a part of. And I'm proud to be a member of All of Us or None. And as you guys have just heard, voting rights has definitely been a staple of All of Us or None since its inception back in 2003. And so real quick, what we were able to accomplish here in 2020, securing those rights for those 55,000 people Dorsey mentioned with the passage of Prop 17, was really the results of almost 2 decades of work. And I know folks in this room understand everything that went into that process. And I'm proud to be up here because I really love diving into banner box history and voting rights history. And what I'm learning is, we really started this fight in 2005, attempting to secure the rights for people in county jails, and on probation. And we first started that by first clarifying, and then we eventually had to move through a lawsuit process challenging the Secretary of State in order to go ahead and really set the stage to secure these rights. And as we moved to extend that right to people on a parole, we took it all the way to the Supreme Court and wound up losing in 2007. And that was a minor setback for a major comeback. And ultimately in 2015, after years of going back and forth through what I discovered was 3 different Secretary of States and various lawsuits, all of us was finally able to secure and codify the right to vote for people in county jails, on probation, and anybody coming home released under realignment. And that was huge. That was another result of a different lawsuit in 2011 in California. And so here in 2020, yeah, we can clap, folks, because it was a major fight. It definitely was a major fight. And so here in 2020, over a decade later, we learned some things. You guys heard Desmond and Norris. We learned new and relevant skills about how to move our policy, how to move public policy through the ballot box. We learned about phone banking and the power of text messaging. You guys heard them just speak about that. And we also learned about the importance of market brand in our political campaigns. With that knowledge, we double back around to our allies, but no longer as clients, and I'm very proud of this. We double back as partners and leaders and solidified our fight in this right to vote and our place at this table, and I feel like as this convening shows, in a real collective way. I personally do remember being mobilized down to Florida to put boots on the ground and get that passed. I do remember knocking on them doors. It was really hot. And it was really humid, okay? And I think I ran out of shorts while we were down there, okay? It was very hot. And so it all paid off, you know what I'm saying? The measure passed with 60% of the vote. We came back home, broke bread, strategized like we doing today, took the lessons from that victory, and we did the same thing. We put it to the voters, the decision to vote for people on parole. We put it to the voters through Prop 17, and that passed with 60% of the vote. And at that point, we knew all the strategizing and meeting and what we doing today, we knew it paid off. You know, I'm proud to say that we distributed over 10,000 Yes on 17 face masks that, as you guys heard, was bought and paid for by formerly incarcerated people. We called over 50,000 people. You guys probably was people in California. I know you probably heard my voice on the phone. We hustled 300,000 text messages. We reached nearly 1 million people through radio and digital ads. Again, we learned a thing or two about brand marketing down in Florida. We took out full-page ads in major newspapers. We printed and distributed materials, all while engaging formerly incarcerated people in leadership roles. I remember while working on ACA 6, the legislative fight to get us to the ballot box, we had to demand our leadership roles at certain tables. I remember me and Dorsey being in the room having to flex our voting history to let people know, hey, you know, we in here and we got something to say. And me and Dorsey, we did that. Dorsey left out, you don't remember, but we did that, you know. And so I'm very proud of that, and to see these wins and these successes, that's what really drives my energy today. Okay, so moving into 2022, before we get started, the Brennan Center just released a new report. How many folks here are familiar with the Brennan Center? You guys read their reports and stuff like that? I see a few hands out here. They just released a new report detailing what's shaping up around the country as it relates to voting rights restoration. And I highly encourage everybody in here, whether you're working on voting rights, to check the report out. It has interactive state maps and charts you can work with, and it really gives a glimpse of where the successes are and the areas and states that we could be paying attention to. According to this report, as of now, at least 20 bills have been pre-filled or introduced in 7 states that will restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated people or expand on some of the current policies that we've already won. Mississippi has 7 bills that will offer a pathway to restore voting rights for folks. Missouri has a bill going that will restore voting rights to people on probation and parole after a felony conviction. I'm confident most folks have heard about how our victory with Amendment 4 kind of got watered down. And so there's current legislation going that will go ahead and eliminate that requirement to pay your fines and fees, and that will restore the power back to what we did. And in Virginia, there's a series of 8 bills that will provide automatic voting rights restoration to individuals upon release, and they're attacking it through a constitutional amendment as well. And so with that, again, we are winning out here. We really making headway, like Dorsey said, when other people are not, and we need to believe in that and be grounded in that. And so with that, we're going to get off into the panel here. We're going to hear what our members and our people have been up to, and we're going to go ahead and let these gentlemen introduce themselves. I'm confident folks have had time to take a look at the plenary, to be able to take a peek at people's bios. And so I'm going to let these esteemed guys introduce themselves. We'll do a quick round of intros, and we'll get off into this discussion. All righty, let's go ahead. Steve first.
Hello, everybody. My name is Steven Huerta. I've been a member of All of Us and None since 2005. It's been a long time. I am also a former candidate for House District 125 in the state of Texas. And before I pass it on, and I'll talk about it more, I'll tell you this. I didn't win that race, but I did win. And do you know why? Because I fucking ran.
Thanks, Steve. My name is Bruce Reilly. I'm a founding committee member of the formerly incarcerated convicted people and families movement. And that's where I met Norris originally, and that's where I met Dorsey and other people that are in this room. And I fought for voting rights when I was on the inside as a jailhouse lawyer. I was getting ready to file a big suit, but then I got out. And while I was on parole, some folks wanted to put together a constitutional amendment. So I worked on that and then ended up writing a constitutional amendment, got my voting rights. We got 51% of the vote. This was in Rhode Island. And then a few years later, decided to move to Louisiana to go to law school and join up with Norris. And then I lost my voting rights again while I was on probation. And so we had to fight all over again. So got that law passed a few years into it, got my voting rights again on probation. And so I really worked on a lot of different campaigns, some constitutional amendments, some political campaigns. And our C4 does a lot of work around political campaigns and endorsing candidates. So I'm really deep under the hood with strategy and sequencing things and making sure all the things kind of come together. That's my forte. So anyone wants to talk strategy about any of these types of things, I'm definitely down to talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your patience today, especially for those who went to Alcatraz. That was an experience. My name is Joe Paul. I've been a part of All of Us or None since 2009. And I'm very proud to be a part of the LA chapter with Susan Burton and our team down there. I'm the vice president of our strategic partnerships and government relations for the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership, which is a network of a bunch of organizations, whether they be nonprofits, whether they be public sector, whether they be representatives from various offices or impacted people directly who've been incarcerated. And my primary goal has been and always will be to ensure that our people understand what it means to be citizens. The whole difference in terms of taking people and isolating them and creating this differentiation of versus, others has really been a problem with me. I was released from prison in 1992. It's been 30 years now since I was incarcerated. I was able to have my crimey, he was 15 years old, went to prison. He came home. We assisted him coming home back in 2015. He was a murder. He was convicted of murder, and I went for manslaughter. We were young kids. But nevertheless, being able to bring him home and be a part of the work that we're doing has been one of the greatest gifts of my lives, because I didn't know in '87 when we committed that crime that almost 30 years later we'll be able to work to change our communities, and that's just something I'm really proud of. But the reason I'm sitting on this panel is because for the last 12 years, I've really had a focus on the ability of registering felons to vote within our county jails. It was amazing that people didn't understand, first of all, that individuals are innocent until proven guilty. And that in spite of being incarcerated, that we were still able to support them. And it just took having conversations with our county registrar recorder, with our sheriffs, and we've been through 3 separate sheriffs since that time when I started. and each one was open arms. Maybe Sheriff McDonald wasn't so much, but nevertheless, we still went in. We used some ACLU tactics and have been able to register thousands of individuals within the county jail system. I'm not satisfied. At the peak of our efforts, which really put us on the map, we registered 1,500 people to vote, and about 900 of those individuals cast their ballots in the custody environment. But at that time, there were 17,000 individuals incarcerated. So we didn't even touch 10%. But to what was said earlier, the reason why it was so empowering, because in local elections, 1,000 votes will change the circumstances as far as the outcome. And you take a group of people who normally have never put their name on a ballot or put their decision on who a candidate or what a proposition or what a local ordinance may be, and it changes everything. And in doing that, it taught me how to incorporate that into these rehabilitative processes that we call reentry. And I'm really proud that people are now beginning to understand, especially with the passage of Prop 17 in California. And if you guys don't know, I mean, that was an uphill climb. And I just thank Dorsey and the team here in California that was really serious about ensuring that the progress we've made was not something we rested on the laurels of, that there's more to do. And so, and I also want to bring to the table, Dorsey, what you did around the right for felons to sit on juries. Because I think voting rights and the right to be a part of the process of convicting someone as a jury of peers, literally, is critical. Because when you give your folks a chance to know, I'm going to seek justice to the fullest extent of the law, and I'm going to take this to 12 in a box, and you feel that your people are going to be there to understand the nuances of your case, you're just not going to get thrown away because somebody sees you as a gang member or somebody sees you as a dope dealer or a black person who's in handcuffs. It changes the game on how our work happens when people begin to come home, even if they are convicted. And so that's a piece of the journey. Voting rights, our work within the LA County jails, and every subsequent piece around it, every state prison that we've worked in before Prop 17, encouraging those who have lost their right to vote because they're in state prison, having them to speak to their family members who still have the right to vote, who may feel apathetic about even saying my vote don't matter and it's not going to change nothing, having our folks who are incarcerated speaking to their families to say you're voting for me has been a tool that we've used, and it really does help the work in terms of folks transitioning.
I think they all work. It's just how you work it.
Oh, they me. The one I had earlier. See, this is working fine. It's that one. Okay, so thank you all so much. I really appreciate everything that everybody just shared, and we're going to jump off into this engagement. We just have some soft questions to help guide our discussion here. So let me see. Let's go ahead and get started with, legal challenges, political advocacy, and grassroots organizing. Which to focus on first? How to balance, in your opinion? Whoever want to take it first.
You know, I think that when we talk about strategy, and it's an important part of any campaign. And I'm not a lawyer, but we are at a hotel. We'll probably have a lot of lawyers in here. But I think that even when you want to change the system in a legal manner, you have to have a grassroots campaign before, or at least to have muscle behind your intent. Because the purpose of all going out and getting people to vote and build grassroots support isn't just simply to get you to vote at that particular moment. We're trying to build the longevity of success, because we can lose that very quickly in the next election. So grassroots organizing and grassroots campaign are very key to pushing agendas. Some people like to put the cart before the horse. You know, I think if we were an organization that our total purpose was, legal battles, it might just be a legal strategy in the courtroom. But as people like us, right, who are missing the resources and access to people who have the legal skills to give us the ability to have a legal fight and win a win. We need to be able to have grassroots support behind that effort, because that's how we are able to put pressure on policy decision makers that this issue that is coming before this particular committee or judiciary is an issue that is supported by voters, and voters vote you in and they vote you out. So it's not just about the issue itself. Our effort to change policy must come with a very clear and present danger to their seat. We must be able to have that kind of political impression upon them. We're not just talking about this law. I'm talking about the next 4 years of your life. Where will you be putting your law office at? Because it won't be putting on a robe coming to this courtroom. And that is why I think that grassroots campaigning and grassroots organizing are a critical key to any advocacy effort. And that comes before, right, you're ready to launch the full thing out, because the last thing you want to do at the same time is give your opposition a clear window into everything you're thinking about trying to do. So organizing and grassroots organizing is essential. And I know my colleagues here have a lot to say on it, but and I would want to make sure that we all have plenty of time to answer questions. So also, like Bruce said, I am also a strategist, and the next question I'm going to be able to talk about that. And I am also here for you. You do not have to send me an invoice. All you have to do is send me the question, and I will send you an answer. Here for free. Right? So we are your experts. Do not hire anybody to give you this type of advice. Take that money and hire somebody to carry it out in the streets.
I can't agree with Steve enough on that. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like collectively, if you think about how much expertise we've shared with each other, right? All the non-reports. Okay, it is the mic. You know, it's how you working, but it's the conversations, it's the text message in the middle of the night, being like, "Yo, man, I'm trying to figure this thing out, and I know you've been doing this thing for 10 years. Like, just give me the cheat sheet, right?" So, like, it's all that stuff that is essential, and that's the only way we've gotten here, right? Before there was money, there was us. And so now we got money, now what are we going to do with it? We better not spend all our time fighting over it, I'll tell you that much. I ain't here for that. I got all my bills are on auto. I just work on the work, right? I don't even care. They probably rip me off right now. But honestly, our strategy was always like a three-prong attack, right? You got your organizing, as Steve was saying. You got your legislation. You got your litigation. And each one feeds the other. You know, it's a little bit of the by any means necessary. It's death of a thousand cuts. And it's seeing opportunities. It's not the slow and steady wins the race. It's knowing when to sprint, when to catch your breath, when to jog, when to get a ride, when to sprint again, right? You got to just decide strategically when you're going to be pushing one thing more than the other. And you also got to be building that movement around you where you get this sense of like the enemy is hit. Jump on. Because sometimes you're like, oh, no, not me. And it's like, oh, I guess you weren't my friend after all, right? But that's where we got to build those friendships. And when we're coming out there, Norris always has this one about people that throw their rock and hide their hand. We throw the rock and we stand there on parole and say it was me that threw the rock. But that does something, right? That inspires people, and it makes them step back a little bit and say, oh, hot damn, like these people really are standing up for their freedom, for their citizenship, for their rights, for these things that they say are all American. And so we got to seize this sort of, you know, I'll leave the speech about Americanism aside because I'm in friendly audience, but we got to seize that high moral ground of Americanism and say, we're the most American people in this room. Y'all are the frauds, right? And let's have a fight and redefine what that means to be a citizen, so to speak, right? And what they strip away from us or to be a resident, a community member, family member, right? And so for us, we had a strong lawsuit that we started and put together by ourselves, right? Because nobody wanted to jump in, as Dorsey knows from his experience. A lot of those folks say it's a lost cause. We had the highest incarceration rate that anywhere on the planet had ever known, right? But just as the last page of Das Kapital says, capitalism builds its own gravediggers, so too does mass incarceration. And you can't lock up everybody without doing the organizing for us. And so one of our organizing strategies is from the inside out. We got thousands of folk on the inside that know thousands of people on the outside. And so right now we're using JPay with a system. Before it was, the phone, the mail, the whatever, right? But as we get tighter and tighter with systems, we can manage conversations with 1,000 people. And we actually have got leaders on the inside. And I know some folks have a similar situation out here, but we do it like straight up in the sense of voting and endorsements. And so you might see like, oh, you got the whatever, blah, blah, blah endorsement, 4 letters that mean something, right? What does that endorsement really mean? Does it come with a mailer? Does it come with boots on the ground? Does it come with a TV commercial? Does it come with a phone tree? Does it come with members? When you get the endorsement of Voters Organized to Educate, you get the endorsement of a community. You get the endorsement of people who are experts on the criminal legal system, who believe and fight for these things. And so we're educating people around issues. And so they're going to be like, for years and years, it was, I don't know, Norris, you tell me. They're both black, they're both women, they both want to be judged. You tell me which one's better. Because as you know, like, unless you really, really know, you don't know. These politicians tell you whatever they want. They all got similar resumes, right? And so, but then there's someone who's in that system who can be like, nah, this one needs to be the judge. That one needs to be fired, right? And so we have mechanized that process, and we've gotten the money to do it and do it big time. And we've really changed things by getting the district attorney elected and getting the sheriff elected, as Norris mentioned. We've gotten judges elected. The city council is now like all in our favor right now. But the thing is, now we can go to work. So in my mind, this is where it begins. Because now we can start saying, this is what the community really needs. This is what defund the police actually looks like without using that slogan that's so problematic, right? And so we got to look at not just getting our voting rights, but what do we do with them? And that's what inspires people to get the voting rights, what we can do with them. And we're here to tell you that down in Louisiana, we're doing stuff with them, and we're here to help everyone else do the similar around the country.
Excellent. I think I would add the question, it's grassroots. And from my particular perspective and what's worked is leveraging the faith-based community. It is typically, in the black community at least as far as I'm concerned, it is epicenter for most people returning home. Grandma's there, aunties there, baby mamas are there, and folks tap in. And so organizing churches and really allowing those ministers or bishops or pastors to have a deep understanding of the resource that they represent and demystifying the process that they felt what it would take if you had a prison ministry or, a reentry ministry, if you will, really has been one of the mainstay or stabilizing factors that has helped us to maintain the efforts that we've created. And so I work with a pastor, Bishop Noel Jones, down in Los Angeles. I've been working with him for about 20 plus years now, and he has a lot of influence, and we leverage that influence for other pastors who may not be as inviting to embrace the ideas of working with the formerly incarcerated on a consistent basis, digging into the trenches. And it's also a base of volunteers. It allows us to be able to mobilize very quickly to put hundreds of people together to be able to go inside of the county jails, to go inside of the prisons and really minister to people with something tangible and substantive that actually allows them to put some power in their own hands, and that's the franchise, right? And then obviously speaking to their spirituality and their morality and all the other things that people need when they're preparing to transition. That's been a very valuable tool, and I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to experience it. The other thing, because we've been in the work of reentry for so long, we've gained a lot of relationships with guys who were really the progenitors of creating the havoc in communities before they got sentenced to 25 to life, to 15 to life, and now they want to do something to change their lives. So they use their influence to get us into communities that we never could have gotten into without their endorsement, without the big homies saying, hey, let these folks come in and holler at you. And we've been able to go in and work with gangs. I got my boy Sam Cunningham here. He's been in this work. He was incarcerated, and others that were with him that has totally helped us to go into communities that we've never had relationship with, just on the word of the big homie saying, hey, this dude is going to come tap in. He's going to have a conversation with y'all about some stuff, some voting, and so forth, so on. Able to talk to the youngsters, being able to talk to the older cats who's trying to do the intervention work to save lives and so forth, so on, and hearing their stories and giving them this tool that they never thought was relevant to the work that they're trying to do has been incredibly impactful. So basically using what we have before us that don't cost us nothing, but understanding how to leverage it for everything that we need to do to get to the next level, and then use that to talk to the elected officials or candidates for office to say what we can do if you support this or if you support that, and then using that relationship between the community, whether it's the churches, whether it's the homies in the neighborhood, and the candidates or ultimately elected officials, and creating accountability across all those folks that we can use that 4-year cycle that person may be in office for to really grade everyone's contribution and understand what we didn't know before we started has been a real asset. And I'm grateful to be able to watch it happen.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much. That was so much knowledge sharing. I heard a few people go into strategy. So how about we talk about what sort of voting rights campaigns were you guys a part of? Why? And what strategies did you use to be effective? And what strategy you feel was the most effective? And let me go back to Steve.
Yeah, that's a good question. Whenever wakes up with knowledge in their head, you have to seek it. And, you know, knowledge is what's going to free us. So what strategies did I use? Well, I learned strategy from a very good friend of mine who is an international political consultant and has been very instrumental in a lot of the elections in Central and South America, electing the presidents. His name is Manuel Medina, and he was a chairman for the Bexar County Democratic Party in Bexar County. And that gentleman took much of his time every day to teach me his strategies. Before you know it, within a year, and Tommy Acosta here from Texas was also really instrumental in our work down there. Within a year, we were running statewide campaigns. I had 500 employees. We were walking around with $67,000, $80,000 cash. I'm not working it right. $67,000 to $80,000 cash, having to go out and pay formerly incarcerated people that we were putting out in the streets moving agendas. And in many elections, we ran like multiple candidates. So, winning 54 seats in an entire campaign, judges, district attorneys, JPs, people who wanted to do that. And we took that knowledge, right, that I'm telling you I'm so proud of, that formerly incarcerated people were a part of, was missing something. And it was this. I was the van data manager for the state of Texas. And one of the things that I noticed was that we were not on there. I was spending dollars on our campaigns, through campaigns that we were hired to work on, and bringing our people to vote, but it wasn't us. I said, we're going to change this shit. So in the state of Texas, people who have been in the prison system can vote if you're on probation, on deferred adjudication, which is not a felony conviction, or if you've completed your probation. I'm a data guy. I was taught to do things with data that would blow your mind. So I'll get your pen and pencils out because I'm about to tell you something you can do in your community. What we did was, I went down and I did our probation department director, Jarvis Anderson. You remember Jarvis, right, Tom? I said, Jarvis, I said, what do you want, Steve? I said, I want your data. What? So I want your data. I didn't tell him why. I just said I wanted it. So we did the following. We got the data. And I removed all the people who were ineligible to vote in the state of Texas. And then we went to go visit everyone who was on probation and registered them to vote. Today in San Antonio, we have a database of over 179,000 formerly incarcerated or justice impacted voters, and a list of what we call household multipliers, and that is that most households have at least 2 or 3. Jesus, hello. So, what I want you to know that when we were doing this, I learned several things that I'm going to give you a heads up on. One is this. We move around a lot. We're not always in the same place. So many of us are registered to vote at that one relative's house that you know is always taking care of your mail and all this other stuff. That one person that goes, here again, send your mail over here, me home. Right? Yeah. And so we had to learn how to build a connection with the family member to be able to reach the people who were the multiple household person in their home, who was a registered voter, who was on probation, but wasn't voting. Work goes into it. So even if you get what you need, it's nothing unless you work it. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Another thing that we did, I think, important in terms of strategies was, I guess you could say, I think was really critical. How many of you sit at a table trying to register somebody to vote? Raise your hand. I used to do that. And I said, this is not cost effective for the little funds that we have. I got to learn how to make this $1 turn around and spend itself like I'm holding 100. And it's not easy. So what I did was, and Tom, we started doing the voter registration, and Tom has an organization called Big Homies, and they're also a partner, a coalition partner with all of us and none, and so we do the voting that are out there. We still do outreaching with the table and stuff like that. But what we did really was said, look, rather than sit at the table, I'm going to give you a list of 75 people in the precinct who are on probation, who are either registered to vote or not registered to vote, and go and see them. And spend the next 3 hours going to these homes rather than the next 3 hours sitting there and waiting for 2 people to come who probably don't live in the neighborhood that community event is happening in, and having them get registered to vote. Because when I looked at the data, right, I was able to see who the voter registrars were, what organizations, right? That data is there. So I learned that groups like Willie Velasquez, who was receiving millions of dollars in voter registration in a 6-year period, had only registered less than 30 formerly incarcerated people. But they were getting boatloads of money. They lost that money. There's a lot of things that happened with them. But the data lets you know that. So that's a strategy. So go and do that. I think it's really important. And there's one more thing that we did. Every state is required under federal law for the state public safety department to send a list of ineligible voters to the county elections office. And that's what we call them in Texas. I don't know what they call them where you're from, but you get the deal. Ask for it. Because those are homes that are going to have 2 or 3 voters who are justice impacted, but they're probably not voting. And do you know why? Because when my clients, the fire department, hired me, and they paid us big money to go out there and get votes, they made damn sure I did not spend 1 single cent on anyone who is not a traditional voter. So your job when you get this information in your strategy, is to then turn them in to those triple C, triple D voters. And do you know why? So that when you don't have the money to get out there, somebody else is out there getting them because you made sure that they are now eligible to be on a campaign manager's walk list, who doesn't see what their record is, just knows, oh shit, I'm gonna go see Steve Huerta. He's voted the last 3 elections. He don't know I've been to prison, and he don't need to know. All we need to do is put our people on the map. So go out there and build your maps.
Yeah. That's great advice, Steve. Definitely, you know, as I think we all know, like the major parties have given up on our community primarily because we don't show up on those lists, right? And then they do, you know, it's like basically if you think that something's a bad investment and so therefore you don't invest in it, you ensure the outcome and you make sure that it doesn't work, right? And so that's the world that we live in now, is they're not willing to take a chance on the people that we are. But we only have a choice but to take a chance on ourselves and our communities. So we're the ones that have to be the beta model and then do what Steve did and say, I'm going to force you to now put your money over here on this side of town. So for us, I mean, our number one strategy is always like be the fire, right? Because if you're the fire, people are going to have to either see the light or feel the heat, right? And sometimes if you do enough of your homework, you're going to see exactly who needs to feel the heat or see the light, right? So like, research your situation. Like, do I need to change the state law? Do I need to change the Constitution? Do I need to change one word, the definition of that one word? Or what's the smallest change I can do, you know, to then get the thing? Because people don't like big, massive changes, but you can usually get a small one. And progress sometimes is a little bit asymmetrical, right? Can I jump to this little ledge to then swing on the rope to get to this ledge, to then climb over here to get to this ledge? Right, and so our progress in Louisiana to get voting rights has been a bit asymmetrical. We had to do a lot of different things, but we knew that ultimately we needed some head honchos that don't traditionally communicate with us to then either feel the heat or see the light. And so we have a 2/3 Republican legislature. We have staunch conservative, you know, at least semi-racist, if not all the way, Supreme Court judges. Right, so we knew what we were up against. So we can't play that we're just like gonna win the crowd. Some fiery speech by Dorsey Nunn, no offense, is not gonna convince anybody to change their mind. But you know what? Showing up does. And showing up day after day after day, year after year. And I'll tell you, when our lawsuit first got a hearing, and we walked into the courtroom for the very first preliminary hearing, it wasn't the full blown, but we were just like, I saw the capacity on the side. It said something like 113. And I turned to Norris and I was like, that's how many people we got to bring next time. Right? Fill that mofo up. And so that's what we did. And you know what? We got a favorable, but not all the, we got like one of those like good rulings, but didn't go all the way type ruling. So I was like, ooh. And then people just like, wow, what did the judge said that? Right? So we got people to get to the point where like, I don't understand why people on probation can't vote. Like, I don't like people in the community paying taxes on, we got Probation Parole Association writing, get all your amicus letters, right? You get Sentencing Project, crunch some data. You get League of Women Voters. You get your ACLUs and such. You get the National Council of Jewish Women. You get anybody who you think is, in the sphere, right? All saying the same thing, so that your target is the only outlier. Right? They're the only ones. You educate and convince the journalists to all be on your side. Every time they want to do a story about voting rights, they come to you first. Then they go to the Secretary of State. Then they go to the registrar. Right? They're like, what are they trying to do here? Like, well, I'll tell you what they're probably trying to do. Right? And you get your quotes out there to compete with their quotes. You get on as many panels as you can. You try to get on a panel with them. I love being on a panel with the opposition, because then you got to hear 2 points of view and be like, huh. And they don't hold up to cross-examination, right? And so you get everything's an arena. Everything's an arena for combat, and you're playing to the crowd, right? The courthouse, the state house, all of our testimonies were out of the park. And you know what? When our after 5 years of putting the bill in, meanwhile the litigation is going too, but finally this guy stands up in the Senate. It had passed the House after multiple votes. And we have a lobbyist. We got all of our stuff. And, I mean, there was some, like, logistical gymnastics happening that I wasn't even aware of. How do we get a third vote on this, right? Like, we lost, I thought. But also, it was us saying, like, I mean, I'll just say it. I yelled at all the allies. Say, motherfuckers, don't be asking us to stand up with you for anything. This is our number one issue, voting rights. If we don't have the right to vote, why are we going to support you on issue A, B, C, D, E, F, or G? If you all ain't going all in on this, you ain't with us. Oh, I'll make some calls. Damn right you'll make some calls. But we had to get mad with these people, you know, their little civil rights educations, you know, and talking about the such and such holiday or the month, right? So sometimes you got to give, as Nora says, the corrective behavior conversation. And we work well together. I'm usually like the asshole who swears at people, and he's the one who's like all dignified and stuff, right? But anyway, so when we got to the Senate side, this guy stands up who was a former prosecutor, a Republican leader in the Senate, white guy, you know, and he starts telling a story about when people come to ask him to be a certain way on some legislation. And before he meets with any of his constituents, he always looks up to see if they're a registered voter. And then they'll come and he'll hear him out and he'll be like, I notice you're not a registered voter. I mean, so, and you know, if he doesn't agree with them, I suggest you fill this out, get registered, and vote me out of office. And he just said it all nonchalant, right? Everyone's just kind of like, whoa, it's like kind of real, you know? And he goes, you know, and he starts rattling off all these statistics that would put Louisiana on the liberal side of the spectrum. Ain't nobody in Louisiana wants that, right? And I'm like, man, that's statistics that I gave this guy. And so he's rattling this stuff, and we're watching it on the screen. Norris and I had to be in North Carolina, but everybody else was there. And he's like, you know, and people were saying, like, the Saints supported this bill. Like, we got some Saints players to, like, you know, get on board. It's like, but I don't come here for the Saints. You know, they're a nice team and all. They're football players. I come up here for, like, people. You know, people in my community. People like Chico. Chico is on the lifetime registry, in case you don't know. Black man who, when he testified, had two main points. He's like, you want me to go pick your cotton? You want me to pay taxes? But you don't want me to give you the right to vote. Why don't you, you know, let me not pay taxes? You know, and they're all kind of like, that sounds like a good idea, Jim, you know. And he said that, but he's like, you know, I can teach Sunday school, but I got to drop my wife off so that she can vote and I wait in the car, right? And he's a gentle old man. He's a sweetheart. Everybody loves Chico. We call it Chico's Cafe, the legislature. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house when he said he's here for Chico. And those people in the blue shirts who are here every day and they want their voting rights. Meanwhile, I got this constituent who doesn't even bother to vote trying to tell me how to vote on legislation. He supported our bill, and everybody jumped in line right behind him. And that was all because we had let him see the light and let other people feel the heat all around them and all the arenas around them, right? Everything is a battleground, and you win. When someone's running for office, right, you have surveys. All the candidates. Do you believe everyone living in the community should have the right to vote? That's like the number one question. Are you willing to work, you know, with the community to get voting rights for all, right? Now, like 5 people, they want to be your representative or whatever. Like, oh, well, yeah, of course I support that. Okay, good. Mayor, same thing. Judge, same thing. And you just keep on hammering them with the question. You go to a thing, like, you know, people in the community don't really care about, you know, whatever, the violence, whatever. It's like, do you think everybody here should have voting rights? Yeah, everybody should, right? You got to use all those opportunities. You put everybody on the record, and you get that as a conversation. And then when that legislation comes up, and it's one of these things where there's a huge line of people from all walks of life, everybody, you know, other legislators, researchers, historians, you know, they want to tell their tale. They want to add their 2 cents. The lawyers want to add in why it's like legally, you know, proper, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, who'd be against it? And you get all them crickets. And that's what you got to do. You got to get them to have crickets while all your people are speaking up.
And I would just add really briefly, just know your role. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a a policy person. I'm just a person who comes from a community, the Crenshaw district in LA, that was tired of watching my people suffer and be ignorant of their rights as a citizen. And I figured out how to learn that myself and tap into all the brilliant people that were at the table fighting for those things. And then cover down, so as they're standing in these rooms fighting with these elected officials or with these policymakers, that their argument at that level could become real in the streets. Because any legislative person to tell you, it's not just about past, but implementation of it. And we work on the implementation side. We will make sure that people understand that this, and I found that to be something incredibly important. And so the only strategy piece that I would add, or a effort that I saw strategy really work out well in, California was suffering, about a decade ago with this issue of overcrowding in our jails and prisons particularly, and a lawsuit was filed to create some real push to change that. And we ultimately had the Public Safety Realignment Act in 2011, AB 109. It changed everything. But it also created a lot of convolution in terms of who could vote and who couldn't vote. And Dorsey and the team were very much at the forefront of fighting for that. And what I found, again, knowing my role, was to work on the ground to make sure that the people who are on probation or those who are on post-release community supervision, which were normally parolees that are now coming down and having to be on probation, and making sure they understood how to cast their ballot. And then as those lawsuits and as those challenges in the courts were happening, we were empowering people. So when it became real, we had an army of people ready to turn up and show that that was valid and it made sense. And so I would just say, in terms of how to take all this and make sense out of it, for those of you who are not policy people or top-notch organizers, if you will, just know your role and know how to fit into the lanes that become available for you and go hard when those lanes open up.
I really love that ending about know your role. I feel like that does lead to a lot of the problems we have right now when we join in various coalitions and trying to figure out who to ask for what and who not. So with that, we are out of time. So we're going to cut short the last question, whatever little cheesy closing remarks I had, because they would not have sound any more better than what these gentlemen just did. It wouldn't have been no more scholarly, articulate, none of that. So give it up again for these gentlemen. And as we bring this to an end, I do want to fit this in here, though. How many folks in here is familiar with the Pamela Mosley case, story, situation, injustice, whatever it is you want to call it? Please, the hand, the Pamela Mosley situation. Oh, I see a few little hands over here. So just real quick before we get kicked off the stage. Pamela Mosley is a 44-year-old black woman. She's formerly incarcerated, who just was sentenced to 6 years in prison for trying to register to vote as an ineligible, formerly incarcerated person. So I want everybody to take when you laying down tonight, please plug in your little phone, Pamela Mosley, and just check out this story. Somebody said what? Memphis, Tennessee. Pamela Mosley, folks, and we're going to end it with that. Please check out the Pamela Mosley story. It really highlights the importance of why we should be focused on voting. Folks already touched on why we should be putting people in office to vote for. If you dig into the story, Pamela, this is really how she got tagged. Pamela actually tried to run for mayor. And that whole thing started this whole snowball that she wound up in this fight about was she eligible or not to even try to register to vote. And she's now doing 6 years in prison. So with that, that's the end of our panel. And give us another hand of applause, I guess.
He equipped around his hammer, but for what though? Hard to be inspired when your environment is cutthroat. Threw us in the fire, but we survived and it's up though. Before we smell flowers, yeah, we knew the smell of gun smoke. Grandma used to say the darker you is, the harder life. It always made me shed a tear, cause grandma dark as night. They taught us self-hate and now she's scarred for life. Concrete jungle, we could barely see the stars at night. Throughout distractions, now they acting like we can't see. Let us off them plantations, but we ain't free. They say it's hard to see the picture when you in the frame. I'll make this bitch come to life, watch how you paint me.